how's it going? I'm here with Eric Bissell, eriktology.net, and we're talking about the Paleo Hebrew. I've been watching a lot of his videos for a really long time, and just having a conversation with Eric, just try to get the word out even more. And so I guess the question to you, Eric, is what made you start? Like, how did this occur to you to study the Paleo Hebrew? Because that just seems so random to me. So I'll just shut up and I'll let you go.
At the heart of it, at the beginning, it goes back to that verse that you were mentioning earlier: ask, seek, and knock.
That's Mathew 7, I believe.
So there's a bit of a story behind how I got this started. So briefly, I was raised in a Christian household, went to a Calvinist doctrine evangelical Presbyterian church down in Los Angeles for many years, went to a Baptist grade school and high school. So I've heard thousands of sermons and studies about the Bible, was a affirmed believer. Back in right after 2001 event, 9/11, right after that, just the timing, we ended up going to a local here in Portland, Oregon, a local, what they called a Torah study. So it was essentially a Christian Bible study that was in particular looking at the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, meaning that each week they would read a certain portion, what's called a parashah reading. And I had read these things before, read the Bible, read the various books. Mostly the Christian study is in the New Testament. This particular Bible study met on Saturday. Sometimes we'd meet for 10 or 12 hours, long Bible study on the Sabbath day, as some refer to it. Other people have a different regard for when the Sabbath day is, but this particular group met on Saturday. Typically, I would work on Saturday, but so to regard this Bible study, I had to start not working on Saturday, but going to this. I was still going to a Sunday church. Was going to either Foursquare or Calvary Chapel or the Vineyard. I was completely plugged into the, you might say, the church culture, in that I taught Sunday school, had a home church that I was leading for a little while, and I went to other people's home churches, sang in the choir, played music in the choir. I wasn't just a random churchgoer. I was completely involved. So I started going to this Torah study. Was going there for a couple years, 2002 and 2003.
How old are you at this point? Do you recall?
Well, I turned 50 in 2004.
Okay. So
in 2004, my brother was making a few trips to Nigeria. He had a friend who was a missionary over there. And so my brother and a couple of his friends here from Oregon took the Jesus film, which is by Wycliffe Bible Translators, where they have the book of Luke, and I think they took a reduced version. It's a couple hours long, but they took the whole book of Luke and they lip synced it to different languages around the world. They're still doing this project. And there's in Nigeria about 500 different languages. Not, I guess only a few of them have a written language. There's what they call a commercial trade language, a common language amongst many different people. So in other words, you might speak other languages or other dialects, but you'd have this one that's used for commerce, kind of like back in the days of Rome. Greece Greek language was used as the commercial trade language. So people would maybe speak Aramaic or Hebrew or Greek or Latin, but Greek was the common one. So this particular language group called Azeri was that commercial language. So Wycliffe put the book of Luke into this Azeri language, but it wasn't written, but at least people could understand it. So my brother and his friends, they grab a generator and a video projector, get in a Land Cruiser and ride way out to the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Nigeria, and put out an advertisement where people from all over came to watch this movie. And they basically had never seen a movie, never read the Bible, never been to church, never read any books. It's a whole different, we might almost consider it to be a Stone Age culture in some respects, in terms of telecommunications or just having literature and TV, that kind of thing. They don't have it. Anyway, so they put a big sheet up and projected this movie that nobody's ever seen a movie. But here it is, the book of Luke. And Jesus is speaking Azeri, their language. And they're seeing all this for the first time. I'm trying to set this up. Imagine that impact.
Yeah.
In America, we have kind of a Christian culture, a Christian heritage. You know, the Pilgrims came over and were Bible readers and believers, and it's kind of ingrained into our whole culture, but not necessarily other places, not over there. Even though the British were running Nigeria for a while, and they have kind of a Christian subculture. There's a big Muslim influence, and there's also this animist regard. They have basically what we would call witch doctors or shaman as their local leaders who have a connection with the spiritual realm, the nether world, to, you might say, connect the local village's interests to the forces, the powers that are behind the scenes, if they have a spiritual awareness. But they don't know anything about the Bible. They don't know anything about Jesus, about God, who we call God, about the stories in the Bible. And, well, here they're bringing the book of Luke. So they're still not getting the rest of the picture, but at least they're getting the book of Luke. So imagine if you've never seen any movie about Jesus, and here's this guy who's saying these wonderful things and healing people and raising Lazarus from the dead, and he's a pretty special guy. And then all of a sudden, the religious authorities that are having a hard time with him grab him and subject him to the Roman authority that beats him up and crucifies him and throws him in a tomb. I mean, you didn't see that coming a few minutes ago. It's this surprise. It's like, what the heck they do that for? But what you didn't see coming also is that 3 days later, it's like, okay, is this a Hollywood movie? Is this just some entertainment? No, this really happened 2,000 years ago. Well, these people didn't ever hear that story. So all of a sudden, here's this surprise to the storyline, the narrative, and then he floats up in the air and these angels say, well, he's coming back. Of course, that's in the book of Mathew, talk about that. I'm not sure exactly how it plays out in the book of Luke. I don't recall offhand. But what I'm saying is that this whole Christian narrative is very strange words to these Nigerians. And then they say, okay, so what of this story? Well, hey, you believe the story and you get to have your sins forgiven and go to heaven when you die. You want to sign up? It's like, yeah, sure, why not? Okay, now what do we do? Well, now what do you do? Read the Bible, go to church, be a nice person, pray. It's like, well, except there is no Bible, there is no church, there is no preacher, there is nobody else around who can give you any guidance along this path because there's no written language, it doesn't exist. Well, what do we do? And then they look at their watch. Hey, look, we got to get to the next village. We brought you the good news, but now we got to go and give somebody else the good news. So they get to the next village. Same thing happens. Tens of thousands of people responding to the gospel message in the book of Luke. And yet there's no words. There's no writing. There's no way for them to know what to do next. It's like, did you remember the story? Did you remember what that guy said in that film? No, didn't remember. I mean, we remember maybe a few things that had an impact, but hang on to that. Well, memorize a few Bible verses. We don't have a Bible. Nothing's written. Well, sorry, now we got to get to the next village. And then it happened again and again. And my brother had come back from Nigeria, and we're sitting there in his car talking, and he said, you know, this is a big problem. And I said, well, it's actually Yahweh's problem. His message, his words, his people, why don't they have a written alphabet? A lot of people in this world, even today, 2020, do not have a written language, a written alphabet. As a matter of fact, people say that the Semitic alphabet, the idea of having words written with phonetic characters, is the world's greatest invention.
Huh.
More important than electricity, than running water, than the wheel, than transportation, than computers. The written alphabet was the world's greatest invention. And yet, excuse me, nobody knows when it was developed, who did it, why, how they got it started. Nobody knows. So the fact that we in America, you might say Western culture, use the phonetic alphabet, the Eastern countries, China, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, they have a different way of writing, different sort of pictures. It's not the phonetic Semitic alphabet letters. It works, but it's a whole different way of thinking in your mind to have that language. But then there's these people like in Nigeria that have nothing. So sitting there saying, well, it's you. And so just a little simple prayer. Hey, Yahweh, give something to the Nigerians so that they can hear your words, so that they can read your words, so that they can understand. What do you give them? You got to give them something. And they need it like right now. Well, now it's been 15 years since then, or it's been longer than that now. But when it was at 15 years, Wycliffe had put the effort towards giving some sort of alphabet system to that Iziri language. And then they printed, I believe it was the book of Luke and then other books. And they actually brought some books of the Bible to that people group just, I think it was last year, 2019. Quite a significant occasion to bring the word of God in their own language and then teach them the letters of how to read that language. Now, the little bit of the problem that I see with that is that this is my understanding of what it was, is that the man who had written the Living Bible, which is a paraphrase, donated it to Wycliffe, and that is the translation that they use to translate it into Iziri, the Living Bible. So it's not copying King James. It's not copying the Greek or the Hebrew, but it's the Word of God. Well, which God? How accurate is that? But at least they have something. They have the book in the Living Bible format, spoken in Iziri, but at least it's something. But the other problem is that there's a certain limited budget that Wycliffe or anybody else can invest in. So they take people groups based on the number of people. So if you only have a few people speaking a certain dialect, there's no time to sit there and do all that study. So maybe they'll develop some sort of alphabet and give them a chapter, maybe just a few verses. But then if there's a few thousand people, well, they'll invest a little bit more effort. Maybe they get a whole chapter, a couple chapters. And then if there's 100,000 or maybe 1,000,000 people speaking another certain language, well, that one, they'll maybe put the effort in to give them a whole book. But nobody's getting the whole Bible. There's just no time. But the question is, what do people who can't read, who have no written alphabet? Well, so I was going to this Torah study, and it was about, I think it was 2 weeks later, the fellow who was teaching was giving a certain sermon based on comparing the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony to the chronological development as an itinerary, you might say, of the Moedim, the festivals, which are laid out in Leviticus 23. So what this means is that you say, now I remember it as a Christian hearing, oh, when Jesus said, I'm going to go to prepare a place for you, and then I'm going to come back, and he's going to come back with his friends and the blowing of trumpets, and then you've got the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, and 5 were ready and 5 weren't, but they had all fallen asleep. Ready meaning having the oil. That wasn't just this, boy, why'd he do that? Who thought up this scenario? No, he's following in the footsteps, as it were, of the traditional Jewish cultural wedding ceremony. There's a certain movie called Betrothed, where these guys back in Tennessee, present tense, a family has tried to do this. And so the young man got betrothed to a lady. This was a few years ago. We just watched this movie at Sukkot. And he goes and prepares a place. And when his dad says, yeah, it looks like it's done, okay, then he goes to get her, and it's a total surprise. And she has to be ready, and she's with her friends, and he has his friends come running. Hey, the bridegroom's coming, bridegroom's coming, and they blow in these shofars, and it was a surprise day when the wedding would be. Nobody knew quite when he would pull it off, and it's an interesting movie. But what's
the name of that movie? Do you remember?
Betrothed.
Okay, Betrothed. Okay.
And they were trying to portray exactly the thing that Yeshua, Jesus, is doing, which is a model of the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, which is a foreign culture to us in America. It's just Christian mind. It's like, well, that's kind of a curious way they do things, but whatever, it's like a reenactment. Some people have Civil War reenactment or Viking or Renaissance or whatever, and it's just like, well, it's just like a cultural reenactment. But this is supposedly the culture of heaven, so it's not just some random, gee, what do those people do that dress funny that live on the other side of the planet, a long time ago? But this is apparently a present consideration. So for Jesus to say, look at this itinerary of events is so significant that I'm going to do it this way. And to think, oh, that's just what them Jews do. That's one thing. But him to say, as this fellow was given the sermon, oh no, this is correlated, patterned after the Moedim, the festivals, as listed in Leviticus 23, which are also listed in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, but the primary, easy to read place is Leviticus 23. And I know some Christians presently, even living in America with full access to all literature, have no Old Testament in their Bible. I remember at one point I had a little Bible that was presented by the Gideons that had the New Testament, Psalms, and Proverbs. It's like, well, that's the only thing that really mattered, especially if you have a limited access. So the question is, well, what do you mean that it really matters? It's like if you have like it was given to the GIs in World War II, this little Gideon's Bible, and they put it in hotels and motels back in the 60s. It's like, hey, there's the Bible you can read. And it's like, well, you don't want to give people too much information. So here, just the New Testament, Psalms and Proverbs. I mean, just get on board. But what about that other stuff? Stuff in the Torah and the prophets and well, it's a bunch of history and a bunch of strange stuff that nobody quite necessarily knows what to do with it unless you're a Jew, and then you have it's some cultural heritage. But what you really need is the New Testament. It's like, well, okay, wait a second. As a Christian, we were never, ever, ever in the Presbyterian Church or ever going to the Baptist school. I don't recall ever having studied or given a regard to the festivals.
No.
I don't even remember once in 50 years ever discussing them as if they were anything, much less something important. But here, the guy's giving the sermon and relating it to Jesus going away and preparing a place and coming back. So it's like, oh, this was a matter of interest to me. And because I had been going to this Torah study for a couple years, 2002 and 2003, where they're going through these what they call parashah readings, or like comes from the word to parse or to cut into sections, and like chapters are cut into sections. Parsnips are cut into pieces, sliced like carrots. All these things are cut up into sections, playing off of the definition of different Hebrew words, carrot and parsnip and parse, parsing verbs, breaking them down. Anyway, it's just part of the language study. What I'm saying is that because I just spent 2 years going through week by week, this section, the next section, the next section, and then going back to the next year, the same sections, going over this and this and this, and you read about the 7 days of creation. Off the top of your head, do you know what he did on day 4 in Genesis 1? What thing was created on day 4? Kurt.
I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head.
You know why you don't know?
As I haven't gone through it every year.
Well, it just doesn't matter. But what I realized when he was giving this talk was all of a sudden I saw the pattern of the Moedim, the pattern of the festivals that he was synchronizing to the wedding ceremony. All of a sudden in my mind, I realized it's exactly synchronized to the 7 days of creation. And it was exactly synchronized in Exodus 25, the pattern of the Mishcahn, the tabernacle. All of a sudden, I just saw it. And in thinking about it then, what I realized is...
So can I just interrupt for a second? For some people who've never heard that word Mishcahn before, and how it relates to the temple, it's how the temple is laid out. It
was actually the tabernacle in Exodus 25, but then Solomon, when he built the temple was a derivative, a variation of the tabernacle. In other words, the sizes were different, and it was constructed of solid, stone material instead of a tent. But the word Shechem is where we get the word to shack up, to dwell, to be neighborly. It's translated as tabernacle, which comes from the Greek word taverno, which is the B and the V are transposed, which is we get the word in English tavern, which is the local watering hole where you shoot pool and drink beer and hang out with your friends watching TV, sports. That's the tavern. That's the local get-together place. So literally the place where, that's the letter mem as a prefix, the place where you shekken, where you shack, that's the Mishcahn, the place where you get together as neighbors, the local community center. That's the word Mishcahn. So what I'm saying is that a couple weeks after that prayer of saying, hey, Yahweh, what do you give to the Nigerians? Please give them something. They can't read. They don't have any letters. And all of a sudden, I just saw, I had this awareness that the pattern of the events that happened on the first week of creation in Genesis 1 was a perfect match thematically with the Moedim, Leviticus 23, with the pattern of the articles, the objects that are in the tabernacle, Exodus 25, synchronized to the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, which in front of us right now where we are is you have the 3 festivals of the spring, Passover, unleavened bread, and what you may call the counting of weeks that culminated in Pentecost. And then you've got the summer months, and then in the fall, in the autumn, you get Yom Teruah, which is the blowing of trumpets. So that's like with Jesus coming back and, hey, his friends are blowing the trumpets and, oh, here comes the bridegroom. Then you've got Yom Kippur and then Sukkot, the week of tabernacles. And then you've got this last one called Shemini Atzeret. So all that is yet to happen. And the earlier one has already happened when Yeshua was here the first time. So what I'm saying is that when I saw this, I realized if the Nigerians don't have an alphabet where they can translate every word to know what they're supposed to do, if you understand the meaning of these 7 pictures, these 7 images, so you've got the big white fence lining up with Passover. You've got the barbecue grill right inside the fence lining up with unleavened bread. Then you've got this laver, which would line up with Shavuot, Feast of Weeks. And then in the covered place, you've got the menorah, that would be lining up with Yom Teruah. You've got the table of showbread, equivalent of Yom Kippur, the altar of incense with Sukkot, and then the Ark of the Covenant in the most set apart place, what they call the Holy of Holies, lining up with Shemini Atzeret. That's what I saw this picture. So the Sabbath day would line up with the Ark of the Covenant, with Shemini Atzeret. Day 4 would line up with the menorah, the day he put the sun, moon, and stars in the sky. Well, the menorah has lights. Well, it's like lights, like the stars in the sky. So I know that because the first 3 are Passover, unleavened bread, and Shavuot, then the 4th one would be lining up with the stars in the sky. Well, now I'm telling you this as if, oh yeah, that's just what it is. But there's other people that disagree with what I just said. There's most other people, as a matter of fact, would say, no, that's a wrong pattern. Because the first day where they of raising up the sheaths that were cut at the time of the festival of Chag Hamatzot, the unleavened bread, that's one festival. 50 days later is the day of Bikurim, or Pentecost. That's the second festival of that 50-day period, in which case there's no Shemini Atzeret, that's not a festival, and that it's called the last great day, but it's the last great day of Sukkot. So Sukkot would be the 7th festival. See, well, what I presented to you was a different pattern. So if the first festival, if you look in Leviticus 23, it starts off talking about Shabbat. That's technically the first staging of Yahweh's appointed times. But then you've got Passover, which is the 14th day of the first month. Okay?
Yeah.
They call that the whole week as being Passover, or maybe they'll call it unleavened bread. But the point is, if you look real close, that's its own consideration. And then starting on the 15th day, going to the 22nd of the very first month of the year, which would be in the springtime, month of the Aviv, then you have this week of unleavened bread. And somewhere within there, you start counting 50 days. Well, Avi ben Mordecai has brought up, no, that's not even true. There's another way of counting the 50 days. And it's like, okay, so there's a bunch of disagreements about some of these details. But what I'm giving you is the basic pattern. You got 1 day Passover. That's the big white fence. Then you've got the week of unleavened bread, that lining up with the barbecue grill, day 2. Then day 3, Shavuot, is a 50-day festival, like a pregnancy. There's conception, the term of pregnancy, and then the day of giving birth, all one festival. So the 50th day is like the 50th year, called Yovel or Jubilee. That's like the birthday, all one festival. And then you've got the summer months, and then getting into the fall, you've got Yom Teruah on the first day of the 7th month. 10 days later, on the 10th day, from the evening of the 9th to the evening of the 10th, you've got this day called Day of Atonement, Day of Covering, Kippur. Yom Kippur, the day of covering, of atonement. And then 5 days later, on the 15th day of the 7th month, you've got a week of what's called Sukkot, which is Sukkah. Plural is Sukkot. That's tabernacles. That's living in tents. What some people live in tents, other people do it a different way. But what I'm saying is that it's this concept of in temporary dwellings. And then you have the last day, Shemini Atzeret, which Shemini literally is the number 8, or it's also the word for oil, shemen. And then you've got the word Atzer, which means to stop, or one more day to stop and engage these mandatory non-work get-together social events that we call moedim, the Hebrew word that means place of witness and testimony. Mikra Kodesh, Michael Rood brought up that phrasing. Mikra means to be invited or called or summoned. And then Kodesh is the word for translated holy, sacred, or set apart. So you could say, well, they're set apart rehearsals. Rehearsal is mikra, rehearsal? Well, you're called to something. Well, but the word kra, kufresh aleph, also means to learn how to read Hebrew. Called, invited to learn how to read. Where you get the word karaite. Anyway, what I'm saying is that to recognize this pattern, and I realized that the symbols of the tabernacle were loaded with meaning.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second here? So you're saying the barbecue grill, right? So there's a lot of people who have never heard the Old Testament in quotes. What is the barbecue grill?
What they would call the altar of sacrifice.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that to just look at those pictures, the fence, the barbecue grill, the laver, which is a bowl of water. Then you've got the menorah, table of showbread, altar of incense, Ark of the Covenant. Those 7 items. The idea that I had in my mind that day was just give the Nigerians those 7 pictures and tell them what it means. It's all in there. That's all they need. They don't even, if they don't have any way to learn, for somebody to construct alphabet letters for every noise, every phonetic sound, whether it's consonants or vowels, or some other languages have strange other sounds, guttural noises. In China, they have different tones. You can, if you raise your voice, if you lower your voice, whatever, it's a whole different word, even if it's the same phonics. What I'm saying is that English is, I can go, what? Or what? What? Well, in English, it means what, with just an attitude. But in Chinese, you could take the same word and lower your voice, and one might mean an orangutan, the other one a cedar tree, the other one an automobile. I don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is they're completely different things. Mm-hmm. So how do you construct a language? And what I was aware of that day is just give them these 7 pictures, because in the 7 pictures is everything that every word of the Bible is about. I'd have to elaborate. But I went to go tell my brother, and it's like, gosh, I couldn't make it clear for him to comprehend. He was on his way back to Nigeria. And here it is 15 years later, 18 years later, and they now have a book written where the people at Wycliffe or whoever, did invent alphabetic letters and teach the people to read. And now there are pastors, and now they have a Bible, and now they have churches that they can go to. But they also have this enemy, this Boko Haram, who kills the people that are interested in this Christianity.
Mm.
Boko Haram, the evil mouth. So they're basically kind of an Islamic force, which basically says this is all Western, British, American, Christian. It has nothing to do with us, and so we have to expunge it from our midst. Well, the words of Yahuwah I believe can only be written in Hebrew. So I said they get the word of God. Then the question is, well, is the words of Yahuwah the same as the words of God? Some might think they're the same thing, but when you translate words from one language, from its cultural reference into another, something's lost. Yeah. So my perspective is that certainly there's a benefit in providing a language for people to read their own stuff, to read their own heritage, to read of their own interest. But there's a different advantage in all of us learning how to read out of his own very mouth of the creator of the heavens and the earth, Yahweh, in his language, which if he could speak any words to be the most clear, pure, articulate, he could certainly have invented whatever language that was. And apparently that's what he did. He invented Hebrew, Ivrit. And so this collection of 22 letters, it was a year later in 2005 that I realized the alphabet of the Hebrew language fit the pattern of the Mishcahn exactly perfectly, just the same way that you have the 7 days, the 7 moed, the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony. And then I started thinking, well, how many places in the Bible might you find this pattern encrypted? In the Beatitudes, in the book of Revelation, talking about the different 7 churches and all. And I found at least 500 places where the pattern of the alphabet, or it's called the Aleph Bet in Hebrew, that pattern, meaning the themes or the concepts of the letters in their alphabetic order, or in the pattern of this Mishcahn, where you've got the concept here. I'll tell you briefly this concept of the Mishcahn pattern. So there's this tabernacle that Moshe set up in the wilderness. And when the presence of Elohim was there, there's this pillar of fire at night. Well, there's a guy named Andrew Hoy, Project 314, very interesting study, and I'm not in conflict with it, but it's a different model. So he says the fence around the Mishcahn was blue, purple, and red. It wasn't a big white fence. It was a blue, purple, and red fence. And it was round, not rectangular. It's like, okay, whatever. So for me to say the big white fence, I'm just using as this picture because that's what we've always been told. Well, maybe that's wrong. But nevertheless, there's a fence, and it's made out of linen. And linen is basically white, unless it's been dyed, made out of flax fibers. So I use the model of a rectangular big white fence. Just let's go with that for a few minutes. If you have this big white fence and it's got a flaming torch behind it, it's going to glow like a lampshade. So here's a picture of the tabernacle in the wilderness at night, glowing like a lampshade, but all around is the off-grid, out in the desert wilderness, in the darkness. It's just a picture. Well, the first beatitude in Mathew 5 says, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The first day of Passover, Yahweh said, okay, you guys are all slaves in Egypt. You Israelites, you're all held in slavery. But this day, prepare a lamb and cook it and eat it, because at midnight, you're going to be set free. And he's going to put the squeeze on the Egyptians to where they just say, they cry uncle, as it were, and say, okay, you're free, get out of here. So the concept of this fence representing the kingdom of Yahuwah, Yod He Vav He. So in Exodus 25, it's talking about the design of this Mishcahn, and it has 4 colors of embroidery on this white linen fence. There's blue, purple, and red. Well, then there's the white linen itself, and it also has gold. So whether it's blue, purple, red, and gold, or blue, purple, red, white, he's always lists the embroidery in the same pattern. So another part of the story is that, gee, there's 4 colors. There's 4 letters in Yahuwah's name, Yod He Vav He. If one could correlate the letters to the colors, how would that fit? Just thinking, just subjective pondering. Well, Yod, if you know what the letters mean, Yod is a hand that works, like that grabs and powerful arm. Well, the first color is blue. The first letter is Yod. The sky is blue. The Helit is the color of blue, to remember that he made this place and he knows how it works and he told us what to do. And there's a sapphire pave work. Sapphire is generally regarded as blue. So maybe blue speaks of Yod as being the hand of the creator who made this place, who by his authority tells us what's going on and what we ought to do to regard him. Maybe that's what the blue represents. The second letter of his name is a letter He, which means the. It's an expression. Second color is purple. When we think of purple, we just kind of culturally think of the color of royalty. Well, if He is an expression and the first letter speaks of the creator, the second letter is the creator's expression, well, that kind of sounds like Torah. The Torah is the instructions of the creator expressed in words, audibly and written as literature. So the He could mean, hey, here, look at this. This is the expression of the creator. So there you have blue and purple. The next, because he always uses the same sequence of colors. The next color is red. Well, red, the color of blood. Adam means red earth. In Yeshua, the Mashiach came down in the form of Adam, the likeness of man, and he bled. So he came down in the form of Adam to bleed the blood of Adam. Well, that's like the red blood. So there's blue, purple, red. There's these 3 ways that he communicated with us. What he built into creation, what he expressed in the Torah, what Yeshua Mashiach came to exhibit and speak and act out as a man. And then you've got him leaving and saying, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to send you the Ruach, the Comforter, and he's going to lead you into the ways of the truth and remind you of everything I said. Well, that lines up with the white linen, and white linen metaphorically speaks of robes of righteousness.
So this is all just occurring to you while you're studying?
Just pondering and studying and looking at the scripture, and all these connections start to happen in my mind and my thinking. And I'm seeing, realizing that all this stuff is very methodical. Now you could say, wait a minute, this is all your own imagination. It's like, well, except it correlates with what's written. And then there's some question. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's a couple other people that you might say put me up to this. It's like, well, how's that? Well, there's a fellow by the name of Frank Seekins. He wrote a book way back 25 years ago now called Hebrew Word Pictures. And the first version of it was written kind of as a children's book, big pictures on rough paper. Now it's very refined, colored pictures, written quite detailed, almost like it would be a college book, or certainly a high school level. And he's showing where the letters evolved from the original pictographs into the modern letters of Hebrew and English and Russian and Arabic. And he's saying, look at the letter Aleph means ox, and here's how the letter went from the shape of an ox head to what we look at the Latin and the Greek and the English letter A, and the letter B, bet. And he goes through all of them and shows you that the T was the tau or the tav, sign of the cross. So Frank Seekins is a Christian. He's a marriage counselor. He's spoken at different festivals and conferences. I've met him a few times. His orientation of what he believes shows how Hebrew can be used to understand things about how the world is created. When I say that, when I've heard him speak, he's a Christian marriage counselor. So there's insights about how men and women relate, how they talk to each other, how maybe they can get along a little better. And he gets insights from the Hebrew that he correlates. For example, in Hebrew, the word ish, spelled aleph yod shin, is man. Isha is woman, which is spelled aleph shin hey. Well, aleph yod shin, if you take out that yod, and aleph shin hey, if you take out the hey, put them together, you have yod hey, which is Yah. Well, Yah is you might say the poetic short form of Yahweh. Yod hey vav hey. Sometimes in the Psalms, David calls out the word Yah, like hallelujah. Yah means praise Yah. So Yah is.
So I'm just going to interrupt you one more time. So like if people want to go and Eric's got this on his website, eriktology.net with a K.
Man and woman, and you take out Yah, and what you're left with is aleph shin for man minus the yod, and aleph shin for woman minus the hey. So that's the word aleph shin happens to be the word for fire, where in English we get the word ash, which is the black debris, gray dust that ends up when fire has consumed something. So ash, you get two fires. So he's saying, well, that's just a little picture metaphor where you leave Yah out of the equation of both the man and the woman, and you just get two fires that are burning, hotly contending with each other. Okay, well, that's a cute little metaphor, and it's like, well, okay, but that's real. Okay. Mm-hmm. He looked at another word, bet noon, which is the word for son, S-O-N, like the son that's born to a mother and father, and the two letters bet noon. Bet means house. Noon is life or something living. So, and they say noon is the fish that lives in the mem of the water. So the living thing that lives in its environment, well, if the house is the environment, the son, spelled bet noon, is the one born into the house that jumps out of the house and goes to make his own house, and say, hey, isn't that interesting? Then in Hebrew, you can look at the two letters, ben, B-N, bet noon, that spell the word for son, S-O-N. And it's a picture that tells you exactly what it is. And when Frank Seekins noticed that, his mind kind of exploded with insight. And so he put together this book, Hebrew Word Picture. Well, so I got a copy of that book, and I really didn't contemplate it until after I had found this Mishcahn pattern thing. So I didn't look at Frank Seekins in order to find this. I looked at Frank Seekins after I found this and used Frank Seekins' insight to, you might say, validate the quest. Like you're already on a journey and somebody hands you a compass and it's like, oh boy, this compass will be helpful to keep me on my journey. You know, you had been going by road signs or stars in the sky, and now they actually give you a compass. And it's like, wow, this is a wonderful tool. So Frank Seekins had a great tool. There's another fellow back in 2004, 2005, a guy named Jeff Benner. His site is called Ancient Hebrew. I highly recommend him. He has a different way of looking at things, but he really encourages people to regard the Paleo Hebrew, or what he calls ancient Hebrew, and he gives you a lot of good understanding about how Hebrew text is actually written. Though it's written today in modern Hebrew format, he gives you a great regard. And even to this day, I've never really had the time to sit down and read much of his stuff, but he's come out with a number of books, including the whole Old Testament, I believe it is, written in the Paleo Hebrew. You can get that on my site too, but he uses a different font. As a matter of fact, on this thing I call the array, which you're going to add to the conversation here when you edit, at the very top of this, let me explain this, what people will see. On the very top horizontal row, up in the clouds, there's like a thought bubble off on the right. That's like somebody having an idea. And then there's this thing that looked like a bullet head, or somebody cloaked in disguise, a red, almost like a ghost figure with a little slit for where your eyes would be. And it says Bet Gimel Dalet up on top. There's a ladder going from the clouds up into the sky above the clouds. And it's like, what's that supposed to mean? Well, the nose of a fuselage of an airplane or a missile is shaped like that, or a bullet, or some kind of projectile. And the word Bet Gimel Dalet is the second, third, and fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Baged. And it literally means to deceive, betray, to be in disguise, to have the intention of fooling somebody, camouflage. And the letter Bet literally means to put into material form, structure, cosmos. Aleph references Elohim. The first letter of the Hebrew Bible is, the scripture is Bereshit, starting with the letter Bet. And so in the various studies that I've done that are on the internet, on the website here, the various videos, I talk about this and elaborate the concept. Why does the word Bereshit, which is translated Genesis or in the beginning, the word in is the prefix letter Bet? Why doesn't it start with Aleph? That's kind of a mystery riddle that different people have addressed, different rabbis and whatever, but you don't even have to address it in English, because in the beginning starts with the letter I, and that's not the letter B, and so nobody cares because nobody knows, because it doesn't start with the letter B or Bet in English. But in Hebrew, it starts with the letter Bet. Why doesn't it start with the Aleph? I believe the answer is because the Aleph represents the infinite realm, and Bet is the beginning of the material universe. Right. So the fact that it starts with the letter Bet means, okay, we're going to talk about this stuff here within our realm of reference, and Aleph represents everything on the other side of the veil, beyond that which has been disclosed to us is the business of Elohim. So Deuteronomy 29 verse 28, it says, the things which are revealed, well, it says the things which are not revealed, that's Elohim's business. That's his stuff, whatever. But what is revealed is for us and our children to regard all the words of this Torah. So that there, right there, is this, if you know how to read that, that's an encrypted clue as to why it starts with Bet instead of Aleph. Because what he did not reveal to us, the Aleph is the one letter that's silent. Bet, B, that's where it starts to articulate with consonant phonetics. So like that thought bubble on this top horizontal row with this, got an idea. I didn't put a light bulb because the light bulb is a human invention. But inside the thought bubble there of this figure that's just kind of a shape of a head and a neck, it's kind of like, how do you reference the unreferenceable? How do you speak of Elohim who can't be spoken of because he's beyond expression? Well, here's a dotted line and up in the clouds, and he comes up with an idea. What's the idea? To create the universe. And then to somehow, which is his business, come down here as a voyager, a projectile. How do you do that? Well, The letter bet is drawn as an embryo sort of shape in one form of the Paleo orthographics. An embryo. Somehow he's going to come down as an embryo. He is that the same as Yahweh the Father, or is it Yahweh the Son, or what does that mean? Hey, it's his business. John chapter 1 verse 1 tells us a little bit, but even that he left it as a mystery. Not that we have to worry about it, but the point is, somehow from the infinite realm of Elohim, he comes to the finite realm of humanity, being born as an embryo and gimmeling, traveling through the birth canal of the female. That's a kind of a Dalit form, like there you have the third row, this picture of an hourglass sort of a shape where the upper realm transitions into the lower realm, like sand falling through the hourglass. Hey,
let me interrupt you for one more second. All right, so I have the chart pulled up. And if we're following along, you guys want to back up and listen to so we went to the Aleph, and then this picture above the Aleph is representing the infinite side of, well, creation. And then this is the bet in Paleo Hebrew. And then the modern Hebrew is below that. And then Eric was mentioning the colors. The blue, the purple, the red are all right here on these letters. So I will let you continue. I think you left off at Lamed. Or Gimel, sorry.
Gimel. So, well, if I continued with this track of mine, there could be an hour or two just spent on that.
Right, and
but
we can do a whole other video just focused on this chart, because this is...
Sure. Well, that's why there's, just so people know, there's like 300 hours of various videos up on my website, and they're all for free. You can watch them as many times as you want, download whatever you want, download this graphic image off the internet site. If you want to get a really nice copy of this, I have some friends up in Montana who will get it made for you. There's a print shop in Montana where they have a pretty reasonable price for this thing. And I found that if you make it about 2 feet wide, there's actually a couple more rows on the bottom that I added to this other version that they have. But the thing is, it's about maybe 30 inches square, and it's on a high glossy, really clear print. It's a wonderful version. I forget how much it costs. I think it's like about $30 or something, but they'll mail it to you if you can get it from them. And I say that because different print shops have different qualities of print, different paper, different resolution, different expense. And up in Montana, if they can, if you want to contact them, their name is Pete Memmer. That's his name. And somebody contacts me, email, I will get you their number, and you can call them and buy it from them. Or you could just download it and print it yourself. But there's so many pixels that to get the best resolution, it can't come over the internet. It's got to be on a flash drive, which is what I left up there in Montana. And that's the best way to get the best image of this chart. And it's a pretty minimal expense, actually, if anybody wants it. Or you can download it for free off the internet. But what I'm saying is that what this picture is actually a study that, on one hand, which is why they're there, but then all these images mean something. And each one of these pictures is a face of a card. And I made a deck of cards. So these are all the faces of the decks of cards, plus some other ones that aren't even on here, which is why I added a couple rows to the bottom. But this here, just as a poster, as a print, is to give people the idea that the top row is this Mishcahn pattern. So why I started off talking about that, saying like the one on the left is this thought bubble, like the Almighty, the Infinite One, having this idea to create substance and then somehow in disguise traveled down here to engage it. Bet Gimel Dalet, as a human, Hey Vav Zion, behold this man who was put to the crucifix, the weapon, the Roman death, and then put into a tomb. Well, that also lines up with the big white fence of the Mishcahn, the Ket Tet Yod, then the barbecue grill, Kaf Lamed, the laver, Mem Nun, Samik with the menorah, Ayin, table of showbread, Pei, altar of incense, Zadi, lining up with the Ark of the Covenant, Kuf, the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke that was above the Ark of the Covenant when Yahweh's presence was there, and then Reshin Tav. The word Reshin Tav literally means net, trap, or snare. So there's a picture like a spider's web, like Yeshua saying, I'm going to go to prepare a place. I'm going to come back. I'm going to harvest my own. So the letter Kuf is almost like this sickle harvesting wheat, which is that other little pictograph there, to take us away to the place that he's prepared for us, like gathering up your groceries in a bag or a net and taking them home. There's all these metaphorical equivalents in these pictures. The Zadi, like the skeleton waking up out of his coffin. Uh-oh, I'm still alive? What? I thought I was dead. Play on words, kind of a joke. The ayin, the arms of a scale, balancing. The word ayin means weigh, measure, balance, look well to, consider carefully, scrutinize the details. So there's this eyeball, like the judge looking at exactly how the arms of the scale are balanced with each other. So the concept of the word mishpat, shofet is the word judge, mishpat, the concept of judgment, of balance in Yahuwah's kingdom. It says his throne is established on mishpat. So whatever goes around comes around. Yahweh returns a man's way on his own head. So the table of showbread, these two piles of, or these two stacks, loaves of bread, there was 12 altogether, 6 on either side. And you see different pictures of how they had arranged the loaves in the tabernacle. Nobody knows exactly how they did it, but they show sometimes all these drawing racks with the loaves stacked, or were they just 2 stacks on 2 separate piles? Either way, it's kind of speaks of this balancing thing. I could elaborate every one of these pictures, and it could take a few hours. The top row then, this Mishcahn pattern, the second row with the white letters with the colored backgrounds, is the eriktology font of the Paleo Hebrew. The next layer is the pictographic reference, the Aleph being the ox head, the Bet being this tent, this embryonic tent shape. Gimel means camel, Dalet is door. So it's like this door of this infinite engaging the finite, the material with the immaterial, the hourglass shape of these two realms. Hey is a pointer. Hey means the. Vav is a conjunction. The word vav typically is translated as and. So there's a picture of a nail. It's the 6th letter. The book of Revelation talks about the number 6 being the number of man. So there's a stick figure drawn as a man. Number 7 is a Zion, which is the word for weapon or to be adorned by weapons. Het is a fence, and whether it's a fence around a pasture, whether it's a jail, whether it's a tomb, here it's a little sketch of a castle. So it's Yahweh's castle, the kingdom of heaven. Tet is something round. Well, they say it's a snake, but snakes aren't round. Snakes can coil in around, but here's like a reference of a potter's wheel that's round, or a basket, a full basket, literally is what the letter tet means, perhaps drawn as the round rock that was rolled in front of Yeshua's tomb. Yod, the grabbing hand. So here, like King Kong's hand holding the lady that, from the film back when, but that's Yahweh's great hand holding us as his possession. The letter Kaf is an open hand. Lamed, it literally means teach and learn. It's the word for authority, or like the teacher. So there's the guy holding a shepherd's staff. Lamed is drawn as a shepherd's staff, pointing to a Torah scroll of instruction. Mem is water. It's also like a womb. Nun, that which grows in the water like a fish but jumps out, like the son who lives in the house and jumps out, like a bird out of an egg. Samic lining up with the menorah, like a watchtower, the table of showbread then for the ayin, the scales, pay, the mouth, like shows the little graphic as some kind of part of somebody's face blowing air out. It's that which opens and emerges, as it were, like the resurrection. So you have Yeshua coming out of the tomb at Pei Zadi, sprouting back to life. He goes into the tomb at Zion Het. So what I realized later then was that in these letters is a story of the Messiah of Israel, Yeshua, proving that Yeshua is the guy talked about in these letters. So the word Bet Gimel Dalet literally means to come in disguise, traveling to the earth. When Pilate said, behold this man that he had put to the weapon, that's Hevav Zion. To be put into the tomb is Het Tet Yod, for my sin, that I can be absolved and made clean. That's all what the word Het Tet Yod means. And then Kaf Lamed Mem Nun Samek Ayin Pei is like being in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. And then bam, Zadi resurrects. And then he floated up to heaven, Kuf, up into the, like even the shape of the letter Kuf. Pillar of fire, pillar of smoke. He rises up, and the word kumi means to rise up. It also means to place down. And then when he comes back as Resh, as the exalted man, is Sheen, the teeth of El Shaddai, and also the provisions of El Shaddai. Tav, that's the accomplishment of the Aleph. And so what I realized here is that, well, this is the Messiah. This is proving it's talking about Yeshua. Every letter. Well, Daniel 12, when I first didn't even know how to read back in 2005, I hadn't even equated the letters to the Mishcahn pattern. Didn't even know the letters. 2000, I found hundreds of places where this Mishcahn pattern was, looking at English translations. And then all of a sudden, my friend got this Stone's Tanakh, Hebrew translation of the Bible, and I had opened up to Daniel 12. It just happened to be that page. And I saw this word that my eye happened to go to this one Hebrew word. Just happened to. 4 letters, Ayin Dalet hyphen Ayin Tav, the symmetry of those, whatever. I mean, my eye just hit on it. We're like, what word is that? And you look in an interlinear and it says, oh, that's the word that means until the time. Ayin Dalet means until, and Ayin Dalet means Tav. And I remember having the thought, how's anybody supposed to know what time that is? And then the thought happened to drop into my head. Maybe, what if the meaning of until the time, if you knew how to spell those words, it tells you when that time is. Why would I have that thought? I don't know. Just had the thought. What? The spelling of the word Ayin Dalet Ayin Tav that means until the time. Actually, if you knew the meaning of the letters, it'll tell you when that time is. What time is that? Ayin is an eyeball. It means ponder, think, consider, look, weigh, measure. Dalet is a door. So contemplate and understand the essence of. That's Ayin. The door. What door? What door? Well, if you're a Christian, you know that Yeshua claimed to be the door. Well, maybe it's talking about Yeshua. Hyphen joined to Ayin Tav. Ayin, again, ponder, think, weigh, measure, balance, look well to, and consider carefully. Tav, what's Tav? Well, Tav is a sign, a mark, a symbol, a target. Tav is a insignia. Tav is a concept, but Tav is a letter of the alphabet. It's a mark that means something, a shape, an object, a thing. Understand the thing. Understand the meaning of the thing. The meaning of what thing? How about the 22 letters? So here, when I was looking at Ayin Dalet Ayin Tav from Daniel 12, verse 4, not knowing even how to read Hebrew, all of a sudden the thought came to me after contemplating for a while, until the time that you correlate the understanding of Yeshua to the understanding of the 22 letters. That's Ayin Dalet Ayin Tav. Two eyeballs, one that sees Yeshua and the other one that sees the meaning of the letters. And all of a sudden to realize Yeshua is the guy that's being talked about by these 22 letters. But the 22 letters correlate to the Moedim. That's the witness and testimony of his identity. But the Christian church refuses to regard the Moedim. And the Jews refuse to acknowledge Yeshua. So they can't link the two together. Either one, either party has no regard for what the other one regards. So it can't happen as long as you have the Christian mind that says, we don't need no stinking Sabbath day, and we're not going to regard those stupid Jewish holidays. Well, then you're never going to see this. And for the Jews to say that Jesus Christ is an infidel and he can't have come from heaven because there's no way that God's going to come to earth as a man, so we refuse to listen to his words, think about what he says, or have any acknowledgement of any correlation between him and the Torah, much less to appropriate the value of the letters to his story traveling to the earth as a human who would be slain, even though Isaiah 53 perfectly describes what that's about. They refuse to correlate Isaiah 53 to the story of Yeshua, because of what the Christians have made of him, and they refuse to make the correlation. But when you do, with the two eyes, comprehending the Dalitness of Yeshua and the Tavness of each one of these letters, yoking them together, the word that happens to be spelled Dalit Tav literally means right, pious, orthodox, valid truth, legal essence. So for me to say, oh, Jesus is my God and I should worship him, and he did away with the Torah and the Sabbath day and all these rules and instructions, well, that's a false God. There's no way, because it's not Dalit Tav. It's not that. Dalit Tav, DT. But if I say Yeshua is the one who came from the heavens to the earth as the man to be slain, put into the tomb, 3 days and 3 nights later, resurrected, rose up, and he's going to come back for some reason, somehow, that we don't comprehend, but the comprehension can be gained within these 22 letters. And he did it Chet Tet Yod as my sin offering, so that I can be absolved of my guilt and find favor being cleansed. That's what the word spelled Chet Tet Yod means in the Hebrew language, and any Jew who knows the language can testify to that. But the fact that Pilate said, behold this man, is essentially what the words Hey Vav Zion means, though that's not a word that means that. But Hey means the, it's a pointer. Vav is the number 6 referring to a man, and the word spelled Zion Hey or Zion Aleph Tav. There's 2 ways to spell the word this. So to say the Aleph Tav is these meaning of these 22 letters. And you say the man, the Vav, who came down here is the Bet Gimel Dalet from Aleph, from the infinite realm of heaven, came down to materialize through an embryonic birth canal of the woman to be the man who was put to this weapon, who was put into this tomb, and the round rock of Tet rolled in front, and yet by his own hand he claims to have done this. Yod. Those first 10 letters, the number 10, a group of 10 is called a minyan, and it's a legal minimum. So the first 10 letters as a legal statement, he's claiming I, by my hand, the word starts with an aleph, ends with a yod. That means I, myself, by my hand, I own this. This is my thing. He came to do this, and we have nothing to say about it other than thank you. He didn't necessarily explain how, why, or by what protocol he was allowed to, but if he is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and he figured out a way to come down here, then for the rabbis to say there ain't no way he's going to do that makes them dead wrong. If he, by his own determination, determined to come down here and do this, born of a virgin, and I know some believers, Christian mind, who say, no way, he can't do that. It's not going to happen. He had to have been born with an earthly father. And it's like, who makes up these rules anyway? If he made up some rule, some protocol for himself, and he did it, who the hell are we to say that he can't and wouldn't? Oh, I can't wrap my mind around it. Oh, you can't wrap your mind around it because he did something of unearthly proportions. And so now you're going to limit him by what you can wrap your mind around. Try wrapping your mind around these 22 letters. That's enough. To say that you can wrap your mind about anything on the other side of the bet coming from the Aleph realm, and then you're going to use your own limitations to limit the infinite one? Really? That makes sense to you? Okay, I guess the conversation's over then. You can say that the infinite one is finitely limited by what you can imagine, what you can tolerate. And if you can't tolerate it, then why, you're not going to believe that he'll do it. Well, okay. If that's the way you want to believe, if that's the size of your God is as big as you can understand, but from what he's given us in this, as it says in Deuteronomy, anything on the other side of what he's constructed in our minds is his regard, is his business. But whatever he's revealed, which is what's contained in these 22 letters, is for us and our children to do the words of this Torah, Deuteronomy 29, 28, and 29. And then the Christians come up and say, oh, but he changed the rules and he did away with it all. Even though Yeshua said, I have not come here to get rid of anything, but to bring it to its fullness.
Yeah.
Really? But then why don't you regard the Sabbath day and the Modim? What? Consider the instructions and the rules and the ordinances and statutes as it's translated in English. The Chok, the Mishpat, the Torah, the Edot.
You know, you and I have talked about this.
Why don't we do that?
Well,
because he did away with it. Did he? Well, unless you can iron that the Dalet Tov is still in force, then all this is mere intellectual study of some foreign ancient language. But the point is to realize, and I'll just say this and let you speak, to realize that, wait a minute, if Daniel was told to hide these words and seal this book, if this is the understanding what Daniel was told to hide, and this is the unveiling, the unsealing, this is the proof that Yeshua is not the God of the Christians, but he is the Mashiach of Israel as prophesied, then suddenly this study is tremendously more significant than the study of anything on the face of the earth. More important than the stars, more important than computers, more important than psychology, more important than oceanography or the finding of another oil well. This is more important than refinancing the entire world economy. This is the epitome of every pursuit, because if it's the word that he made the entire universe by, as per the regard of John chapter 1, then everything of every regard of any significance can be found in these 22 letters. So you say, well, why, what got into me to sit there and all of a sudden spend the rest of my life investigating the meaning and how this works? Well, it's that understanding that I just happened to bump into, saying, gee, Yahuwah, why don't you give the truth to the Nigerians so that they can see it, since they don't have a language, and here's 7 little pictures.
Wow. Wow. And how long have you been doing this all together? Like 15 years?
Well, right? I started looking at the Torah at the end of 2001. So you call it 2002. Started going to that Torah study.
Yep.
I didn't find the language until 2005. I suddenly saw the Mishcahn pattern in 2004. It's now 2020.
So going back to what you were saying also just about Torah, and it means instructions. And, you know, what I hear so many people say law, you know, and we don't have to follow the law anymore. But if you take that word and it's instructions, you're literally saying, I don't need the Creator's instructions anymore. I've got my own set of instructions I'm going to follow, and that's all I need. And that,
well, there's a little more to it than that. Let's just take the word that means law. It's a 2-letter word, ket and kuf. And if you look here at this picture, the letter het is that fence, like the castle. And the letter kuf lines up with the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke that was over the Ark of the Covenant. So what? Well, think about that. The letter kuf is kind of this mushroom shape, vertical stem, round dome over the top. The letter het is this box, this fence that's kind of like a treasure chest concept. Kind of like, here's a treasure box with a dome top on it, just kind of the quintessential pirate chest, as it were. So here is the treasure chest of all the wonderful things that are exclusively kept for those people who would determine to be righteous and regard Yahuwah's law. Chok. And if you don't want to keep his law, and you think that your righteousness is imputed by the death of your Savior, so don't keep his law. See how far that gets you. Good luck with that. He said in John, 1 John, he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. The word spelled hetkuf is translated law, commandment, and constitution. The constitution of his kingdom is the way his kingdom is built, how it works. And if you think because some pope, some preacher, some bishop, or any other professor type authority tells you, oh, you don't need to keep the laws of God, he changed them. Well, you better hope that he hasn't been lying to you, because John said, by this we know that we love him, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not a vexation, irksome, a terrible distaste in our mouth. And then you go back to Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, and Yahweh says, if you find my ways, my laws, my ideas to be disturbing and inconvenient and detestable and abhorrent to you, then even so I will be abhorrent and detestable to you, and I will spew you out of my face. I'm paraphrasing some of the exact literal words. And so one of the verses in Christian New Testament consideration is, Yeshua said, if you're lukewarm, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. Better that you'd be very cold or very hot. And Yahweh's looking for people that have a passion, a fervor for his stuff. But if you find his stuff to be, whatever, that's the lukewarm, detestable. And he says, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. He also says that they're going to be sheep and goats that he separates, and he's going to be wheat and tares, and people, he's going to separate the righteous from the wicked, and a bunch of people are going to end up being separated away from him. They're going to go, hey, what's up here? Didn't we do miracles in your name, and didn't we preach in your name, and didn't we say, I love you, Jesus, and sing songs to you? And he says, depart from me, I never knew you. What do you mean you never knew me? This is a very serious matter. And to sit here and say, oh, we don't need his law. He changed his law. How do you know that? Well, my pastor told me. Well, how does your pastor know? Well, because it says so in the books of doctrine. Well, where did they come up with the books of doctrine? Well, you go back to the early centuries of the Christian church, and they decided that they don't like Yahweh's stuff. Well, what do you know? They decided that they wanted to make it non-Jewish. Well, you go back to Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, and you go back to a bunch of other places, and Yahweh says, if you find my ways reprehensible to you, you have nothing to do with me or my kingdom. That's the evidence. That's the proof. Look at John. If we do not want to keep his commandments, we're not his. Look at Jeremiah 31. He's going to give us his ruach, his spirit, his mind, his heart. And we will love to do his stuff. We will look forward to doing his stuff his way. And if we notice within ourselves, present tense, that, we don't care for his things. We don't care about his day. We don't care about his festivals. We don't care about his language. We don't care about his name. We don't care about his law. We don't care about the fact that he said, eat unleavened bread for a week in the spring, or blow trumpets on the first day of the 7th month in the fall. Well, guess what? You might not be in his kingdom. You might not be in his family. Jesus may not be your savior, though you use those English words. This is serious business.
Oh man, it's it's really scary when you think about it for 5 seconds. What if what I've been taught has been wrong? Is it worth? It's a kingdom. What kingdom doesn't have laws? Is it going to be anarchy when we get there? You just do what you want? No. No, he's telling us to get ready for it. Get ready for it. This is. Did I ask you, like, did this start opening up in your mind when you started keeping the Shabbat? Is that the thing? Is for me, understanding the scripture was elusive. But the Shabbat just download. I get downloads, you know? He talks. He's there. He has an appointment. And he's waiting for Israel. Us. We are Israel. All the humans on the earth, we're Israel. We can be Israel. He's waiting for us to show up where he is. All of heaven is there, waiting for us. You know, why do we say we don't want it? It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's our God has set aside time and said, hey, come sit with me. I want to sit with you.
You know, there was live in Oregon City here, Oregon. There was a church, a neighborhood church that I visited once a few years back. Visited a couple times. They did a little play, a little enactment as the beginning of the sermon, a little skit. They had a cafe table, like you might see in front of a little coffee shop. And there was 2 chairs. And an older man came and he pulled back one of the chairs and he sat at it. And he sat there, sat there, sat there. Nobody ever came and showed up and sat in the other chair. And after a while, he got up and left. It's like, what am I looking at? Why is this the skit? And during the pastor's sermon, he says, you know, God wants to meet with you. And if you don't show up, he'll sit there and wait and then leave after you've not shown up. But he's sitting there waiting. It's like, oh, okay. So that was the sermon.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little sermon if you think about it. But if you think about, that's the Sabbath day. That's the Mikra Kodesh, the prescribed, you are invited to a meeting with him to learn to read his language. That's the word kara. The first word of the book of Leviticus, chapter 1, verse 1, the first word says, Vayikra. And he called, he invited, he summoned you to learn to read his language.
Yeah.
And we changed that to, and he called. Sorry, you just missed the whole thing. And then we changed that to the word Leviticus. Oh, that was something that the Levites were supposed to do. And because Jesus died on the cross, he abolished the Levitical order, complete distortion and lies. And you're going to trust these men who told you these distorted lies with your eternal salvation. Really? On record of lying and distorting, changing Yahuwah's words that he said would be eternal. And you're going to believe that for your eternal salvation. Well, good luck with that. Go ahead. When I say good luck, the word luck is God. Gimel Dalet, 2 letters, pronounced G and D. Good God. That's right. Good luck. The God of fortune and luck was known as God, Gad. The reason the tribe of Israel was named Gad, GD, Gimel Dalet, was because his mother said, oh, how fortunate, how lucky for me, I have another son. And if you don't trust the very words out of the mouth of Yahuwah our Elohim, creator of heaven and earth, who spoke these Hebrew words with these 22 Hebrew letters, then good luck, good God, you better hope he is, because it's different. What Yahuwah said in Hebrew is different than what it's translated in Greek, or English or the Living Bible or even what they put into the Azeri language.
Well, Eric, I just want to thank you for taking the time, and I'm just going to try to do this once a week, and we'll dig into breaking out some words so we can learn to do it ourselves, and I just want to encourage anybody who's watching this too, that keep the first Sabbath. They come around every week. Scripture talks about teshuvah, turn around, complete 180 from what you're doing right now. And the Christmas season's coming, and just don't even think about that. Make yourself right, man. Get on the Shabbat. He's there. He's there. He's waiting.
Let me explain something. Here's another little code, looking at this chart. The seventh letter is a Zion. It means weapon or to be put to the weapon. Guess what? The Sabbath day, being the seventh day, is the one day that was chopped off, made exclusive, as it were, put to the weapon of the rest of the 6 days of the week. So the very first week, Genesis chapter 1, there was 6 days that Yahweh worked, and then he made exclusive or set apart the seventh day. That's putting the seventh day to the weapon. And metaphorically, he has allowed his Sabbath day to be cut off, removed from us, put to the weapon. There's another set of 7. Ketet Yod is 1, Kaf Lamed is 2, Mem Nun is 3, Samach Ayin Pei is 3, 4, 5, Zadi is 6. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Zadi would be the 7th. Het Yod is 1. Kaf Lamed is 2. Mem Nun is 3. Samach Ayin Pei is 4, 5, 6. Zadi is number 7. So what I'm saying, Zadi also then lines up with the concept of the Sabbath day, the equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant lining up with the Sabbath day, lining up with the day Yeshua rose from the dead. That's why there's a skeleton coming out of a coffin. What I'm saying is, the 2 letters that represent the Sabbath day in the alphabet are being put to the weapon and resurrecting. The Sabbath day was taken away, and here we are, 2020, the Sabbath day being given back. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, Yahweh says, when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, then you will return to these words that Moshe is saying, that I command you this day. These words, Deuteronomy 30, the word spelled Shabbat is Shin Bet Tav, but it's also translated 2 or 3 different ways. And if you don't know how to read Hebrew, you won't see it. The word Shabbat is translated as when you return. When you return to what? When you return to Shabbat. It's kind of like this secret code embedded within the spelling of the words in Hebrew that you cannot see in any other language. He, I believe, provided the Shabbat, the 7th day Sabbath. And some people think it's not Saturday, but it's according to the phases of the moon. That's a different subject. Whatever. We could talk about that another time. They still regard it's the 7th day. It's just, how do you count the 7th day? The Roman Church, the Catholic Church, with Constantine, changed the calendar on purpose. They commanded by their verbal decree. They even said it to Martin Luther at the Reformation time. They said, we changed the day from the 7th to the 1st in order to prove and enforce that our voice supersedes the authority of written scripture. The Catholic Church proved that their voice is more significant than what Yahweh spoke with his voice or what he wrote with his finger on the tables of the 10 Commandments. The Catholic Church has usurped the authority of Yahweh himself. And the Catholic, I heard them say it on their own radio station. They said, every Protestant that regards Sunday as the holy day is an idiot. Every Protestant keeping Sunday as the holy day is bowing their knee to the Pope instead of the Creator. And we don't even know, we don't even care. Why am I being so emphatic? Well, gee, we have in front of us somebody trying to create a civil war in America, somebody trying to take over the planet with this lies of the coronavirus. somebody is trying to inject everybody with a vaccination which will modify your DNA somehow, melt your brain, put you into the place where you cannot think about these things even if you wanted to. That's what's looming on our horizon. We have Christmas right in front of us coming up, which is another time to celebrate the birth of Jesus, only that Jesus that you're celebrating in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 12 and 13, right around there, go read it, Yahuwah, who is the father of that Jesus, said, absolutely do not, this is one of his laws, do not learn the ways of the pagan heathen, the nations around you that I got rid of for you, and do their ceremonial ritual religious practices as if you're worshiping me. Do not copy the ways of the heathens and do it like you're worshiping me. And the Christian church does exactly that with Sunday and Christmas and Easter and Halloween. The Christian church does exactly what Yahweh said not to do by saying, oh, yes, but we're worshiping our Jesus. He's our God now, you know. Jesus is our God, not Yahuwah, not the guy who gave us the 10 Commandments. Jesus is our God. And Jesus said it's okay because in my heart, I love him very much. It's a lie. It's wrong. It's a distortion. It's death. It's alienation from Yahuwah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. If I could speak more emphatically, I would, but I'm telling my own family, my own people, we have inherited lies. I'm also quoting from scripture by saying that. We have inherited lies, empty, worthless things that has no profitability. I'm quoting from scripture. It says one day in the future, people will come back and they're going to say that. So I am officially saying these words. We have been told lies from our pastors, our priests, our professors, our popes, and our own parents who didn't know any better. This is the correction, the reestablishment of truth, the resurrection of the truth, the same way Yeshua, who was put to the weapon as the human incarnation of the truth of the Torah, resurrected. That's what this conversation is about. And no Jewish rabbi will validate it, and no Christian priest will validate it. So here, we're on our own. Anybody who wants the avant-garde regard of the truth, this is it. The restoration of Yahuwah's own personal words in the Paleo Hebrew. Anything else you're going to get is lies, though it's validated by the academia and the ecclesiastical authorities.
So what do? Start with the Sabbath. It's coming up every week.
Learn Hebrew.
Every week, learn the Hebrew on the Sabbath, and you know we're gonna spend some time to teach people how to do exactly this. You know, and just. I just thank you for taking the time, Eric. Can we just end in some prayer, do you think?
Sure.
Yeah. Father, thank you for the time to spend with Eric. And I just, I just denounce anything to do with the sun god. It's all about that, dude. And I know Ezekiel chapter 8, how you speak, you hate him, Father. And it's just his worship of him and the veneration of him is throughout our holidays on this earth. And I thank you that your word stands true today. I thank you that we're able to hold on to this technology while the storm wages against us. We don't care. We don't care. We're going to lean into you, Father, and you're going to get us through it. I just thank you for the time. In Yahushua's name I pray. Amen.
And where we started with this, Yahweh, you said, ask, seek, and knock, and you will answer, and you will open. So open our eyes, open our understanding, open the doors, close the doors to our enemies. Amen. That would shut off your truth, that would try to inject us with vaccines to destroy the creation that you have made. Please protect us, Yahweh. You are our Elohim. We seek refuge in your castle. We are the people of your Pesach. On the day of Passover, where you said you are redeeming us and taking us out to be your people, your We choose to be your people. Protect us, defend us. Thank you, Yahweh. You look to you. Amen. Yahweh, you are our Elohim, no other. You sent Yeshua. We acknowledge that. You used his death to cleanse us from our guilt and shame. We acknowledge that. But we acknowledge that we need to observe your chok, your laws, your instructions, your truth, because we want to, because it's your ruach. because there's where the reality, the power, there's where we're loving you and loving our neighbor, it can be found. And so please inscribe your words on our heart and impel us to do it, to walk in your ways, loving one another as we're following Yeshua, leading us of how to love you. Thank you, Abba Yahweh. B'Shem Yeshua.
Amen.